There we go. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Liz Maguire. I'm the creator and curator of Flea Market Love Letters, a digital archive of vintage love letters. I have already asked some of the folks who've joined us to drop into the chat where they're joining us from. We've got some Canadians, we've got some folks from the UK, we've got some folks from the US. It's wonderful to have you here with us. As you're coming in to join us, if you just want to say where you're from, that will help me know kind of where everyone is this evening. So I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. As I said, my name is Liz Maguire. I am originally from the States. I'm originally from Pennsylvania / Washington, D.C., which is where I started the archive. So if you have had the opportunity to attend one of these virtual events in the past, you're very welcome again. If this is your first event, hello, welcome to Flea Market Love Letters. You're about to hopefully enjoy an hour of me talking about mail, or a little bit under an hour. It's a pleasure to spend this time together and talk about the archive. This is a little bit of a different style of talk. Usually, the talks that I've delivered in the past have been predominantly around the archive itself, so how the archive works, how it comes together, and sort of how I run the project. So this is a little bit of a different experience this evening. Marcella, we have a question. I think there you are.
Sorry, I'm frittering here in the garden, and I just wanted to say I'm from Ireland too, and I'm going to go into the house to get a better reception. Yeah, I'm from the Wee County, but I live across the border, and I'm a letter writer, and I love reading all your stuff. So that's my interruption over.
Oh my gosh, Marcella, you interrupt all you want if you're going to be such a gem with all that. It's such wonderful to have you here. And I'm
Thanks.
delighted to have you joining us. So I think you'll hopefully get a lot out of this evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, wonderful to have Marcella there and to share kind of a little bit about her background, and I would love to know that about more folks as well. Just kind of drop into the chat, let me know where you are, where your background of letters comes from. As I said, the previous iterations of this talk have usually been the history of the archive, and then even though I don't really ever have favorites, I usually pick 2 or 3 series and talk about the different types of the series, maybe the collections and things like that. And as spring was wrapping up this year, I thought I was due another one of these, but I didn't want to just roll out the same presentation, so I decided to challenge myself, and I looked at some of the pieces which had been included in letters. That's often the thing that people really respond to. It might be a photograph, a newspaper clipping, something like that. So that's what we're looking at this evening. P.S. I'm including unusual finds from the archive. So the archive and numbers. I started collecting letters in the 2010s. And in 2017, I established Flea Market Love Letters. So we are 8 years old on Friday, actually. We are 8 years, a wonderful 8 years. Now we're getting very close to the decade mark, so I'm excited to say almost a decade with some gravitas behind it. We have over 3,000 letters in the archive, and over 700 have been shared. So a little bit kind of numbers game there would be the majority of our letters, as you can see, would come from the 1940s or would be from the 1940s. The least amount of our letters would be from the 1950s. And then we would have a pretty nice even spread from the 1910s to the 1930s. So usually in a night like tonight, I would probably get to talk about the 1940s quite a bit, but I actually really adore the 1920s. I just think it's a really fascinating time of history, particularly in the American letters. And so I am delighted to have a couple samplings from the 1920s for us to go over this evening, even though I like all the decades for different reasons. But it's wonderful to be able to pull some of the letters together for you this evening. So when I started putting together this presentation, or this time for us this evening, I wanted to ask myself why we're so interested in these relics of the past, right? So why are we so interested in the handwritten letter? And even today, I was attending a networking event, and we got chatting about letters and the GPO in Dublin, the General Post Offices. The en poste to our postal providers are about to leave the GPO, the General Post Office, which breaks my heart, but is has been a long time coming, and so this became a conversation at the networking event. And as the letter lady, I was asked my opinion about this, so we had the conversation about the letters and all that sort of stuff. And someone asked me, oh, it's amazing that you still write letters, and how did you get into collecting and things like that. So we are interested in these relics of the past, I think. Now, I've had 8 years to think about this, and the last 5 or 6 have been when folks have really started engaging with the project quite seriously. I think we're interested in these letters for a lot of personal reasons, but I'm personally interested in them because they tell real history. So they're real letters written by real people. And so in thinking about the project, right, we find a series of letters. So a series of letters could be 3 letters long, it could be 500 letters long. But we meet these people at the first letter and we say goodbye to them at the last letter. So we see them at this period of time in between whatever arbitrary dates are set. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's 5 years, however the time. But we get to know them in that window, and we get to learn their sense of humor. We get to learn their sort of highs and their lows, and we really get to know them. And we also get to map that against history. So we get to know these people as if they're neighbors or just sort of friends that we get to meet, but we get to know them, the day before World War II is announced, or we get to know them the day before the Great Depression, or we get to know them during the Queen's coronation. We get to know them through these things that we know is history, but which to them are just a Tuesday or a Wednesday afternoon. So I think we're interested in the letters because of that lens, to be able to sort of see everyday history against these big events that we know. But I also wonder if we're not interested in the letters because it gives us a sort of, or at least gives me a sort of backbone and a background about current events. So it's been a wild few years, especially since I started the archive. There's all sorts of stuff going on. The word unprecedented is thrown around a lot, but I'm sure people in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s all felt that things were unprecedented. And so for me, the letters are a way to see how real people dealt with history as it was being lived. And for me, they bring a peace of mind where, I know the story starts and I know the story ends. And I don't know how mine will map onto history, but that's why I think I'm so interested in the letters generally, is sort of what they tell us about history, the human connectivity, but also how they tell us the stories. What was chosen to be included in letters and what we choose to include in letters today is oftentimes sentimental, it's significant. In the 8 years that I've been doing this project, the number of times I actually tried to count, sort of using word search and things like that. I tried to count how many times letters referenced things like included, or even down to photograph or clipping. I tried to do sort of a word search number for you there. And I couldn't really find one because it was so frequent that a letter would say, I'm including photos from our day at the beach, or I'm including a clipping about the train accident. It was sort of, I've always considered the things that are included in letters as walkaways or walkables, because I have the letter, I have the envelope, and then I have this kind of written reference to this thing that was once in the envelope. So this is an example. I think this is a letter from 1944. This is an example of that. Obviously, there was a plant pressed in this envelope. I don't have the plant, but I have the impression of the plant. So it's this, I think this is a great example of kind of how special it is to have things included in the letters and to bring them back to life, to have conversations about maybe why they were included and what they meant. But yeah, oftentimes the inclusions have disappeared, but the 4 that I have for you tonight have remained, and we're very lucky for that. So we'll start with the McAllister letters. So the McAllister letters were written to and by Harriet McAllister from 1912 to 1914 to her beau, George Tietma, in Minnesota in the US. These are fascinating letters. All of these letters are on the Flea Market Love Letters website. You can search under letters and find each letter series by the name of the letter writer or the surname, or kind of however I was able to group them. But the McAllister letters, there's about 50 letters. These are fascinating letters. George and Harriet were separated by, gosh, what's probably now about a 2 hour drive or something like that. But in 1912 to 1914, it was several hours by train. It wasn't as easy to get on a phone. There was no texting. There was no kind of instant communication. So they wrote a lot of letters. They wrote a lot of letters back and forth, a lot of sort of ooey gooey pining, I love you letters, a lot of everyday letters about picking things up or dropping things off or meeting people at train stations and what trains they would be on. And if they're not there at that train, wait for the next train because they've missed the first one. All the sort of stuff that, we're so glued to our phones now, we just don't think about, are very much relevant in the McAllister letters. And one of those instances that I've chosen tonight, there's a few things in the McAllister letters that were included. This is one example we won't go in depth on, but this is a little illustration of a cherub that I found that when I opened the envelope, nothing was describing the illustration. There was no, I'm including this because I'm thinking of you. There was none of that. It was just sort of a little drawing that Harriet had included. And there was another instance that I don't have in the presentation this evening, but of a dance card. So a 1912 or 1913 dance card from the all-girls school, I believe, where Harriet went to school. And it's her dance card. So when we say my dance card is full, this was the literal piece where, you'd go to a dance and someone would ask to put their name in your dance card. And Harriet, for some reason, preserved this little velvet dance card with a string wrapped around it. So it's the reasons that people include things are oftentimes sentimental, and this is one of those sort of mysterious instances from the McAllister collection. This is an undated letter. I'm dating it probably 1914 based on the context of what's included in the letter. George and Harriet marry eventually, and this letter references their upcoming or their impending nuptials. And the reason that I chose this letter, one, because I think it just has a great look to it, but it has two different things that are included. One is somewhat referenced in the letter, the other not so. So what I've done is I've typed up the transcription of the little newspaper clipping that Harriet has stapled to the top of her letter here, which just says 2 front rooms, suitable for young couple, in modern home for light housekeeping, hot water heat, gas, bath, electric light and phone, $12 per month, phone Midway 3980. It's a newspaper advertisement for somewhere to rent. So I love this because this is a young fiance writing to her fiance, sort of imagining, where they're going to live and do you like this place? And we could rent this place for a couple months if this other place becomes available. Very topical, very relevant things that it doesn't have to be 1914. It can be 2025 that young couples are having these conversations. And it's just very sort of, I don't know, it's just very romantic to me. I think kind of the hope and the optimism. And then, of course, the piece of fabric that's included. I have no context for why this fabric is included. There's no, I'm thinking of making a dress out of this. What do you think? There's no, I saw this and thought that your sister would like it. So here's a sample. Let me know if I should get a bolt. It's just simply this beautiful gossamer piece of fabric, which by the maths of the age of the collection is now at least over 110 years old. And it's just this wisp of a piece of fabric. It's beautiful. It's paisley. It's just really special. And I remember when I was doing the McAllister letters, doing them being when I was opening them, photographing them, putting them in chronological order, I was just so struck by the fact that this letter that I didn't have an envelope for, it isn't dated, so I don't really know anything about it outside of the context within the broader series. And I can kind of place it in 1914, probably in the autumn of 1914. There's just these little pieces that come from the outside story into this envelope, into this letter, that influence it and influence the experience of reading the letter, of imagining Harriet writing, and sort of, it's a beautiful thing, these letters, the mysteries that they hold, and kind of part of the piece of the archive that I hope people appreciate is that we don't know everything. We can kind of guesstimate and we can suggest things, but we don't know them. So this is one of those instances where I kind of like not knowing why the fabric is there. And it's just, it's a beautiful little, in my experience, it's a tangible piece that I've been able to handle. So we jump from 1914, we go 12 years later to the Spielman letters. So we've got 3 Spielman letters. This is a small collection. As I said, a series is usually anywhere from 2 to 3 to 150 to 500 letters. So the Spielman letters are 3 letters generally written to Miss Mildred Spielman or to Rusty. So there's 1 to Mildred and 2 to Rusty. But these are letters that are written to them in New York or New Jersey. So these are East Coast letters from the 1920s, 1926. We are under 10 years after the end of World War I. So it's the roaring 20s. We've got a lot going on. We're just a few years shy of the Great Depression. So we're really at a sweet spot between two keystones of history, which is why I love the 1920s. You kind of have this capsule of time, about 8 years, where so much happens and there's so much implosion and stories and things that come from it. And this is just a beautiful instance, I think, of an envelope and the sort of the essence of why I do flea market. So this 1926 letter is Auntie Anna writing to Mildred. It is phenomenally fashion forward. There's a lot of discussion about the types of fabrics which should be worn. Anna is suggesting that Mildred should have a hat designed, but consider the hat design to be worn between seasons. So don't go a particular fabric way because she'll only be able to wear that in the winter rather than in the summer. It's very, if you're into fashion in any way, shape, or form, and fashion comes up quite a bit in the letters. In a few instances I can think of, and this is probably one of the most sort of descriptive fashion pieces. And it isn't saying this is the trendiest thing. This is sort of saying, you know, you need 2 wool stockings and 1 cotton dress for the summer and that sort of stuff. But this fabric sample came with this letter. And Mildred and Anna says to Mildred, how do you like this sample for a straight dress over perhaps a red slip? I have material enough for 2 dresses. Mrs. Fox gave it to me, so if you think it will look well on you and you would like a dress of it, say so, and I'll try to make it for you. Now I must close and get to packing. It's lots of fun and lots of work to move. So it's just this really thoughtful piece, I think, that the aunt is obviously considering making. She's invested in Mildred's wardrobe, and it's the summer of 1926, and she's thinking, you know, do you have everything you need for the winter? I've got this bolt of fabric. Will I make it for you? This is just a close up of the fabric. And I think you can see kind of just, it's most interesting, I think, not to turn this into a fabric analysis, but it's most interesting, I think, that, you know, if it's been transcribed correctly, which I hope that it has because I've done it, if there's a red slip under this, you're kind of getting this kind of see-through element with the patches that aren't blue and white and black, and so the red would have really popped against this, and it's just very visual. I think we were very lucky that we have the sample of fabric, because in the letter, as I said, oftentimes the inclusions go walking, they go walk away. If it's photographs, they get put into an album or they get displayed. If it's a newspaper clipping, it gets read and thrown away. Flowers disintegrate, and fabric is so often included. This is just the 2 examples I have. It's not described in the letter as this black and white fabric and the blue checks and this sort of thing. So it's really fun for me to find these because they help me with my natural curiosity about what has gone missing in other letters. Because I wonder, when someone describes something, I wonder, oh, what did that look like? What did it feel like in the hand? What was it, you know, what was the vision for it, or what were the photos like, and how many photos were there? And it just kind of perpetuates the mystery, which is part of what I love about doing flea market. We start and we end, but there's so much mystery on either side. So the Davis letters are also from the 1920s. This is for Denise. Shout out to Denise, who mentioned in the chat that she's from Pennsylvania. I'm also from Pennsylvania. These letters are from Pennsylvania. These are 15 letters between Mother. We don't really know Mother's name. We do know that she's writing to her son, Jack, who's been sent to school in Florida, and that they date from the 1920s from 1920 to 1926. They don't date consistently from then, so we might have a number of letters from 1920 and then kind of a gap until 1924 or 1926. I wish I had a letter for every single day, but sometimes you get a collection and there might be 4 or 5 letters across 10 years that you're kind of working with. And this is an instance of the Davis letters. We really get an idea of the relationship that she has with Jack. It's an incredible series if you're interested in parental letters. We have several parental letters on the archive, some of which are children writing to their parents, others of which are parents writing to their children. That's what the Flea Market Love Letters is. It's not just romantic love, it's family love and friend love and romantic love and all this sort of stuff. And the Davis letters are a beautiful case of that. And before I go on, the last point I'll make about the Davis letters is that it's a phenomenal case of, in 1926, this mother is encouraging her son to study hard, but also have fun, go on a fishing trip, I think, at one point. And she In another letter, she talks to him about glasses and does he need glasses because he's working too hard and he should go and enjoy time with his friends. And it's just very similar, I think, to a lot of the things that we find ourselves having conversations about 100 years later that may feel incredibly relevant and unique to us and our problems. But you can read back into these letters that are, 99 years old and see that there was a mother who was writing to her son saying, I'm worried that you're not having enough fun. And I'm pretty sure we can all agree that Jack was absolutely having enough fun. His mother just didn't know about it, but he was doing a great job of impressing her with his studies. So Jack had a little brother named Herman, who's referenced several times in the letter. This is a letter from Herman to his brother. It's absolutely hilarious. You can tell it's written by probably a 12 to 14-year-old boy. It's kind of all over the place. It reports his grades. It reports sort of all these different experiences he's having at school. He has he does an appendix at the conclusion. So there's about 4 or 5 different postscripts about various things that he references or includes in the letter. And this is the reference to this little drawing that he includes. So he says, page 5, I'm enclosing a slick drawing I made in school. By the way, I sent Bob Cohen one negative that I found in my letterbox. Did you print them there? Thought you did. So we have one little line to this drawing, but there's also a really beautiful note that Herman makes sort of immediately following this, where he just says, I really miss you. There's no one else to punch here, which I think is just a very it's a very young boy way of saying, I miss you, my brother, but also I would punch you if you were here. So this is just a detail of the Davis letter. It's very interesting. Again, I think we're veering into the fashion. Maybe fashion is an overarching theme of this series, of this presentation this evening, that's just kind of occurring to me now. But it's the principle of sort of the man of the day. So the man of the 1920s. So he's got the sweater vest, and Herman's done the details on the sweater vest. There's even the tiny little note that his shoes are meant to be black, but he didn't want to. I'm sure he didn't want to color them black because then he couldn't have done the little detail he does on them. He's obviously just does put a lot of effort into his creations and into his pieces, and it is just super, super special to have these in the archive. And finally, so we're coming up on the half hour here, and I would say that we probably will finish before the hour, but I just kind of wanted to wrap up our time together this evening with the Sandy and Harry letters. So the Sandy and Harry letters, now if I start talking about them, we may get to 9 o'clock, because the Sandy and Harry letters are the second original collection of Flea Market Love Letters. Flea Market Love Letters started in the 2010s when I was in high school, and I collected my first series of letters. I was at a flea market with my mother. She gave me $20 to leave her alone. Very fair. I spent the $20 in about 5 minutes, and then I was just walking around the flea market, and I found a box of letters. They were all yellowed. They were in a shoebox. It said letters, $5 on the outside, written in Sharpie. I wish I had a photo. I can see it. I can't find a photo. And I went back to my mom and I said, can I have $5 more? And she went, okay, I just gave you 20. What do you need another? And so I said, well, come see. And she saw the shoebox. And I was always interested in history and reading and things when I was a kid. So she saw this as a great summer project, bought the $5. And then for the rest of the summer, my girlfriends would come over and we would basically pour through these, I think it was 1924 letters. We called them the Raymond and Marie letters because it was my dear Marie written by a guy named Raymond. And they were his love letters to Marie. And so I had them put them into chronological order. The very earliest example of Flea Market Love Letters, they haven't been shared to the project. They may in the future. That's a direction I'd love to go with the project. It's a big series, so it takes a little bit of finessing to organize that. But that was actually the first series that I collected as part of the archive. Then flash forward 10 years, I've gone through high school, I've gone through college, I've graduated college. And I am sitting in my apartment, and my apartment is had been recently renovated when we moved in. We lived there for a year, and I find from a handyman who makes reference to repairs being done after a fire that the apartment had been in a fire before we lived there. So I Googled the apartment number, and I find the article online saying, and photographs of the living room I was sitting in, charred. It had been redone by the real estate people. And so I was sitting there, and when you discover this, I was thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is, this place was totally destroyed, and then they built it back up. And then you start thinking, what would you take? That's always the piece where someone thinks, what would you grab in a fire? And I immediately thought of the letters. I thought, I've got letters on my shelf. They're in albums. I've never done anything with them. I look at them every once in a while, but it's nothing special. So I went over and I picked up the Sandy and Harry letters. So the Sandy and Harry letters, I wish I could tell you where I got them. There was a period of time there where I would just pick up envelopes and things from flea markets in those years in between the initial interest and sort of what flea market has become. That's where a lot of kind of the earliest letters came from. I know some came from flea markets in New York. I know a lot came from a flea market in New Jersey. You can kind of tell by the location where they were. New Jersey tends to be the Philadelphia letters, very rarely the New York. New York tends to be more New Jersey, and it tends to be more sort of other cities. Like I can't even tell you where the McAllister letters came from. I just kind of, these letters have landed in my life. But the Sandy and Harry letters, I don't know when I collected them. I know I had them 2017. The apartment was no longer on fire. I was thinking, what would I do? So I pulled down the Sandy and Harry letters and I started to put them on Instagram. And initially I started to only post the envelopes, and I just posted the envelopes, and I had 3 followers, 2 of whom, one was my mom and one was her friend. And that was what I did. I just loved posting details of the letters, envelopes, different things like that. And then I got to thinking that, I'm not the only person who should be reading these. So I started typing them and transcribing them. And that was the earliest days of flea market. So the first collection I ever collected were the Dear Marie letters, the Raymond and Marie letters. Those have yet to be shared. This was the first series that I ever shared as part of flea market. And it's Sandy and Harry letters. It's a 2-part collection. I've gone on for a long time. You've probably read the screen. There's 2 different sets of letters in this collection. So there's Sandy's letters from the 1940s, and there's also her letters from 1953. So what we'll look at tonight are 2 of her letters from the 1940s. But just to set some of the stage for you, in the 1940s, she is a young English woman who has fallen in love with Harry Silverman, who is her American GI boyfriend, who has gone back to the States. And they are engaged. They are not married. She is living in the UK. I think she's living in London or a suburb of London. There's a few instances where she talks about sort of being bombed out, an injury she has from an air raid, really specific examples of life in immediately post-war England. Really, really fascinating. And then eventually we have a time jump. We go from 1946, the collection, to suddenly 1953. She's back in England with their 2 daughters. It's the first time she's been back in almost 10 years, 8 or 10 years. She brings their 2 daughters, and she's writing to Harry from her mother's house. So it's the first time that she's been back. She's brought the girls, and they spend the summer in the UK. The 1953 letters are really fascinating because she is actually part of her uncle. If I remember correctly, it's been some time, but I believe it's her uncle is involved in something to do with the carriage for the coronation. So it's Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, and Sandy just happens to be in England when this is happening. So through the course of her summer letters, we get this amazing on-the-ground perspective of sort of the day-to-day updates of, the coronation and how many people were going to be there and all this sort of stuff. So it's really, really fascinating and a very interesting series. And I'm glad that it's the first we ever shared. But the 2 letters that I've chosen tonight, this 1945 letter, I've pulled a quote from it. So Sandy has written to Harry, "Dear Harry, hello, old chappie," is how it begins. But in the piece that's relevant to what's included, which is the newspaper clipping, she says, "Secondly, I've had no reply from the embassy. It's almost 3 weeks now, but I've been in touch with a girl in Bath. She's also waiting to get across, and she's supplied me with a load of addresses to either write or phone. I've contacted most of them, and they say they can't really promise anything yet a while, as travel now is for priority passengers." So again, this is 45. This is very recent compared to world events. She says, "But I'm going to Southampton to the merchant offices, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed and my eyes too, if it'll help any. Incidentally, the cutting enclosed appeared in all of today's papers, so it seems something might happen after all. So the cutting that she includes, that she staples, says, U.S. plan urges marriage trips for girls left behind. Thousands of prospective brides left behind by American servicemen may soon join their sweethearts in America to marry. If the intended marriages do not take place within 3 months of the girls' arrival in the United States, they will be liable to deportation. Senator Richard Russell, chairman of the Senate Immigration Committee, predicts swift congressional approval of his bill to sanction this immigration of girls who got promises instead of rings. Men are raising the devil because while war brides are being taken care of, nothing is being done for fiancés, Russell said. So it's a really interesting perspective, right? So we go through all of Sandy's letters in the 1940s, and she's basically detailing to Harry that she can't get to the States. There's all sorts of forms that she needs him to send that we don't have his answers in the letters, but she references later, got the forms, brought them to the office. I have tickets for the next ship. Write and tell me that that's the ship I should be on. And then a couple days later, a couple months later, we have, I didn't hear from you, so I sold the tickets to the ship. I need to know where I'm meeting you, how it will work. These initial 1940s letters, which is why the 1950s letters are so beautiful to have, are so full of, she's really hanging on to this she's going to make this work, she's going to make it happen. And it's so interesting because we read about war brides, we, you know, in our families we knew about war brides and war love stories and things like that, but I just think that this newspaper clipping is so relevant because she's explaining the struggles that she's having, and it's backed up by it would just be like sending someone an article now or printing something out for someone. She's saying, I'm not crazy, this is happening. And you know, it maybe gave her a boost and a reason to keep trying. This is the reason I included this letter, and this will be our last letter for the evening together. This is a Sandy and Harry letter. This is written, that last one was from 1945. This is 1946. She's still in England trying to get over to the US. So if anybody is that's over a year, probably two, that she's trying to organize getting to the States. And she includes this little photograph. So she says, thanks awfully for your sweet letter and the pictures. They are tops. The pics I'm enclosing is of my sis and myself. I was just saying that the old boy looked like Dracula when he snapped us, the cad. So it's a great example of so many pieces, right? So the language of Sandy is very well known in her letters for her kind of turn of phrases, her 1940s sort of Katharine Hepburn-esque jargon and things like this. It's very of the time, which is fun to read. Street photography as well doesn't exist as in its capacity anymore, but this is a great example of that. So we see Sandy and her sister Rita here. I believe Sandy may be on the left. She could be on the right. But the reason that I say this is because she's left us a little note, or she left Harry a little note on the back, but she hasn't specified who's left or right. Obviously, because Harry knows her. So if we go and any indication, it could be left, it could be right. But I also kind of love that. I love the fact that we don't really know. Yes, you may read it and say, okay, Rita right, Sandy left, there you go. But in my little brain, I like to think of it as, I don't know. I don't know which one's Sandy, but I like that. I like that mystery part of it. And just to go back real quickly to the beginning here, there's another photograph which I think indicates that she may be the brunette, because this photograph is included with no reference in a further 1946 letter of her, of supposedly, I'm going to imagine it's Sandy and a donkey. So it's a beautiful little time capsule that we have in the Sandy and Harry letters. So if you'd like to learn more about the Sandy and Harry letters, they have been featured, very fortunately, I'm very fortunate, they've been featured in 2 different books. Anna Quinlan's Write for Your Life. There's basically a chapter about letter writing that opens with the story of the Flea Market Love Letters archive. It'd be great if I could say my own name. The Flea Market archive, as well as Harry and Sandy's letters. It's a short, great read. There's a lot of reasons in there. She talks about the mental health benefits of writing, as well as the social benefits, as well as the historical benefits. It's a really beautiful little book. And I'm delighted to have been invited and included. You can read about Harry and Sandy there, but you can also read about them in the Wartime Book Club by Kate Thompson. She very generously, Kate and I met during COVID. She was doing a piece for the paper, and we chatted about letters. She was writing a different book at the time, And she said, let me keep this in the back of my mind. And she did. And she ended up writing the Wartime Book Club, which is a beautiful book, really, really special. And the article that she wrote about Flea Market and the Sandy and Harry letters and being war brides in the UK and the history of that is in the back of the Wartime Book Club. Something else that Kate mentions as we bring our time together this evening to a close is she mentions the charity From Me to You. We have a great affinity for From Me to You at Flea Market Love Letters. I was just speaking to someone about this today in that conversation about the post and handwritten letters, and is the handwritten letter, going extinct and things like that. From Me to You is a great charity to be aware of. They donate letters to folks who are experiencing cancer. They accept letters from around the world. So we've got Canadians, we've got Americans, we've got people from the UK, we've got people from Ireland, we've got people from all over. If you are feeling the itch to write, and it's absolutely no shame, if you have a short pen pal list and you're dying to write some more letters, I recommend checking out the Donate a Letter program from Me to You. You can donate letters my suggestion is with a small donation to cover the cost of stamps as well. But generally, you can donate letters and they will match them with folks who are looking for letters. So it is a charity very near and dear to my heart, and something I always try and mention when talking about the letter historically and the letter now. And the Write More Letters project. So this is the last little bit that I'll tell you about this evening. In 2020, I started the Write More Letters project, which is to 100% of the proceeds go to the charity Hope for the Warriors, which helps with job fulfillment and sort of different needs and things that U.S. military veterans and their families apply for through the charity. It's a really wonderful charity. I'm delighted to be associated with them. Again, 5 years, I've been trying to make small donations through the Write More Letters project. We've got masks, mugs, t-shirts, totes. Masks and mugs were from the COVID era. That was a slip back. That just came back into if you need a mask in the near future. Hopefully we won't. But yeah, so it's a pleasure to have Write More Letters as part of our wheelhouse. But it's the reason I chose the charity, being a military charity, was because so many of our letters were written by people whose lives were directly affected by military service. So it's either, like I said, a lot of those 1940s letters are war letters. A lot of the 1910s letters are kind of on the cusp of World War I. There's a lot of, I think, merit to be learned about those letters and the people who wrote them. And so I'm delighted to support the charity Hope for the Warriors with Write More Letters. So that's our time together this evening. Thank you so much for being here. I am delighted to have you. It has been such a pleasure. I will go ahead and just wrap up the recording now. And I'm here for the chats if anybody is interested or wants to chat about anything. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. And as ever, thank you for being wonderful supporters of the archive. We wouldn't be here without you guys. You are our letter writing community. You're our letter lovers. And we are so lucky to have you. So I will stop the share now. And I will stop the recording.